Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July. I'm going to share with you on the screen shortly the event chart right at the start of the week. This provides a lot of important information to guide us, but please stay with me. I will then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions, as ever, are truly appreciated. If you're a patron, thank you so much for your support. Patrons get a lot of extra information. You can become one from $3 a month. Please see the link below. And also, if you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, I am a consulting astrologer. Check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these as they come in, I share as is. You can see how other people have found the experience. And if you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link below too. I also provide an overview of the dominating astrological influence of each day so we can see the big picture as well as enjoy our zodiac forecast. And if you'd like to ascend above zodiac astrology and embrace the power of natal astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data or your date and place, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights into what makes you tick, your life patterns so far, but how you can work with those energies more succinctly future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you will also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. Please see the link below for more. If you know your tropical astrology, why not check out my draconic version, your soul, your karmic charts, which can be very different from your natal charts. Again, please see below for more. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week. Now, the big takeout is that at the very end of last week, we had the second consecutive Capricorn full moon. But whereas the first one, when the sun had just moved into Cancer, was really caught up in a fog and a rather dreamy, hazy energy of Neptune, on this event, Neptune provided a blessing, suggesting that if we can stay in touch with our instincts, our creativity, but also our spiritual dimension, that's a great start to the week. But of course, if you recall, as last week came to a close, the hustle bustle energies of Mars arrived in Gemini for 6 weeks. Now, of course, Gemini is an air sign. It is about very fast communication, but it links to Pluto in Aquarius for the first time in over 220 years in an enabling trine. Pluto in Aquarius is very much about us as a society, how we're all connected, what our future destiny is, can be to do with the big changes we're seeing in terms of technology. Now, Mars in Gemini can be very strident in its opinions. So although we've got that very shimmering, sensitive energy of the sun just on its last degree, connecting with Neptune in Pisces, the sun in Cancer, as much as we have those watery energies, we have this cutting energy coming from Mars and Pluto. If you're someone who's really in touch with your life journey, you know exactly what you want to achieve, this week you can take a giant step towards your goals. If you're someone who's less sure, there could be a little bit of a conflict between that more rational side of your situation and the side that's much more to do with how you feel. Now, as the day goes on, the sun moves on Monday into its home sign of Leo. It hasn't been here for 11 months. This is something to really celebrate, not least that there's a welcoming committee of Venus and Mercury. So Leo season is definitely full on. Now, the great thing about the sun's arrival in Leo is that its link with Mars, which was developing towards the end of last week, is working much better elementally. If we think the fire of the sun is fed by the air of Mars in Gemini. And of course, Mars also rules the third decan of the sign of Leo as well. So that's a very enabling energy. And that furnace of energy is going to go on right through this week. It's actually going to become exactly in a sextile, again, like the trine, very enabling on Friday. So really exciting. So if you're very, very convinced of what you want to achieve, you've got the enthusiasm, you've got the passion, that energy between Mars and Pluto and Mars and the Sun is terrific. But what if you're not sure? Or what if you have to work collaboratively with another person? Because as this week begins, the Sun's in conflict with Pluto and Venus is in an opposition with the Moon in Aquarius. Now the Moon and Pluto in Aquarius is very much about we. The energy in the sign of Leo is very much more about I. So we could encounter someone who's very singular in what they want to achieve, but we may not feel that they're being very connected or very collaborative in their approach. Also, Mercury in the sign of Leo is in a tense right angle with Uranus. And because we're also going to have a quarter moon at the end of this week, also in the sign of Taurus, how we use resources this week is going to be an important theme. Uranus, of course, is an electric energy and can create a lot of potential for innovation and change in a positive way. But its clash with Mercury suggests we could rush a decision, and particularly if we're feeling a bit more impetuous, or we become critically, with this set of influences, overconfident, oversure of what we've got to say and our right to express it. But if you are in a situation where you're needing to work closely with someone and they're seeing the situation in a 180 different way to you, there could be some big tension. In a natal horoscope, the opposition between the Sun and Pluto can create an individual who has a might is right personality, and their desire to dominate and over assert can actually be really tricky to deal with. Now, of course, it won't necessarily mean they won't be successful, because it will give them a much greater conviction of their sense of purpose. And of course, the Sun being in the sign of Leo is very much about investing in our individuality, showcasing our talent, our flair, our creativity, but also our playfulness. So it could mean that we encounter someone who's not really joining in as we'd like, or it could be that something we feel passionate about, someone can be tuned out from, or critically, what we want to manifest for our future, whether it's around love, whether it's around a project, an interest, a talent we have, it might not be something that someone else is particularly interested in or invested in, and that in itself can create some tension. So if there are going to be some clashes in the early part of this week, perhaps right through to Sunday with the quarter moon, it wouldn't be a surprise if it was around money or a difference of values, because money is, after all, only an exchange. It's a commodity. You know, if we do something for someone and swap something, it's still an exchange, and that's what money is. So those are some of the big themes. We've also got Mercury on Thursday emerging from that tense right angle to Uranus and moving into its rather dry second home of Virgo. Now, Mercury here is great for precision, for discrimination, for working through the details, for sifting out what's truly important and what is not. But I feel it can be a great counterpoint to this dramatic energy that's unfolding this week, because it can help us to just get one foot on terra firma, to just be as realistic as possible. Because one of the things I love about Mercury in the sign of Virgo is that it wants to see some kind of tangible outcome. But also on Friday, not only does the Sun and Mars reach that peak of the sextile, we do have Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, going into a retrograde, which will last through to the 29th of December this year. Now, the inversion is going to go through 4 degrees, from 23 through to 19. If you do have a cardinal position from around about 20 degrees to 16 degrees, so cardinal is Aries, Cancer, Libra or Capricorn, you're going to feel that Chiron retrograde more keenly. Chiron essentially is where we can show our superpower. Has got a reputation for being directly linked to health. I think its influence is much more to do with the psychology. Its icon is the key. If we understand Chiron and also become more peaceful about the part of Chiron that is more tricky, in other words, where we give, we're unlikely to get it back in a quid pro quo basis. And once we come to terms with that, then the trauma of Chiron can ease away. But in the sign of Aries, it's very much about identity, and it's been pushing us all since February 2019 to become much more aware of the importance of individuality. And then, of course, since the middle of July 2023, we've had the North Node urging us in Aries to do the same. So something to be conscious of if we feel that our identity is not quite as solid as it could be. That's the area that we can beaver away upon through to the end of the year. But as I mentioned before, on Sunday, the quarter moon in the sign of Taurus brings into sharp relief the difference between where we want to be very affectionate, perhaps even very generous, more spontaneous with our spending decisions, that the square between Mercury and Uranus aroused too. There could be someone, for example, by the end of the week who wants to have some kind of support from us that is financial. But if this has become a little bit of a pattern and it's a loved one, this may be the perfect juncture to just remind them that their financial affairs is their responsibility. So that brings us to the end of a very important, hugely energized week, which has fantastic opportunities, but we just need to be aware that we can't necessarily expect everybody close to us to be on exactly the same page. And if they're not, some big clashes are possible. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs, from Aries through to Pisces. But remember, if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Your ruler is Mars, and Mars has made its way into the sign of Gemini, which is a very fluid sign. It's flexible, it's mutable, it's about ideas, but it can also be about physicality. If you have been feeling that your life has become rather too sedentary, the next 6 weeks offers a glorious opportunity to be much more active, particularly as Mars forges an instant brilliant angle to Pluto in the part of your situation to do with your connection to others. So if you wanted to get together with other people in a walking or running club or group, go swimming or cycling, this is your chance to really spark the whole process. But of course the sun is very, very important to us all. It's the core of our existence, and it also rules the second decan of your zodiac sign. So you have an affinity for the sun. The sun is also exalted in your sign too, and that moves later on Monday into the sign of Leo. It rules this sign, but this for you gives you another ignition point. It's linking back to Mars. So through this week, but peaking on Friday, this can really give you an even greater sense of determination, of drive, passion, but also movement forwards. It's just that the sun is going to be in an opposition with Pluto. That peaks on Tuesday. That can create some politics, to be honest, particularly if you're wanting to to break out and do something more for yourself, perhaps in a close relationship, a partner or your kids or even your parents might not appreciate your desire to be a little bit more creative or free and easy in terms of your own particular role. But equally, as this week begins, Uranus, the planet which has been causing a lot of electric tension for you around your sector of resources, right from March 2019 full time, that's clashing with Mercury. That goes on pretty well to Thursday. If you are someone who's really picking up momentum on something that you really feel inspired about, the chances are that can give you that extra slice of self-confidence and conviction to go forwards with it. But if that requires some kind of cash or financial input, just make sure you really evaluate all the details. You're going to get an opportunity to do that on Thursday when Mercury, the planet of thought and talk, moves into the sign of Virgo, which is very much about precision. So if you do need to drill down into the details, that switch will certainly help. But this is a week which is very much about big energy, being more dramatic. And if you feel that your social situation, for example, has been a little muted over the last 5 weeks, which wouldn't be an entire surprise because there's been a lot of focus on your home, emotional and family life. What you may want to achieve this week is just a more lively, interactive time. And if you can get together with other jolly, energized people, you're definitely going to be making the most of the opportunity. But on Friday, Chiron, the wounded healer, very much to do with where we can shine in terms of what we give to others, but very often where we feel we don't get much back. That goes into its annual retrograde through to the 29th of December. Now, it's starting that journey at 23 degrees and it goes back to 19. If you have got a planet or player in your natal chart from around about 25 degrees Aries through to about 16 degrees Aries, it can be affected by this particular event. And it may ask you in some ways to rethink some part of your approach. But the week comes to a close with a quarter moon in the sign of Taurus. And again, that more impulsive energy can come up, but also it could give you just that little bit of a push to be more speculative. And sometimes we do have to try something in order to gain a reward. Maybe it is sending that text message to someone that you really like. It may take a little bit of Dutch courage, but once you've done it, it could give you a nefarious thrill, but particularly if it's received positively. But of course, there's no guarantee in any relationship that people want to align with us, but sometimes we have to speculate to accumulate. So that quarter moon could bring that energy to the fore. But the one thing I think we can guarantee for this week, particularly after all the draining energy that Saturn has been applying to your situation over the last 15 months, and the more tender energy that's been generated with the Sun's passage through Cancer, you're going to feel much more outgoing and much more on form. You're at your best, Aries, when you're more spontaneous, when you listen to your instincts and just go for it. You're bold. Let other people do the navel gazing. This is your time, seize it, but just be aware that someone may see something very differently to you. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Taurus, your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As last week came to a close, we had that second consecutive Capricorn full moon. But for you, that represents the 9th house, which is about higher ideals. But it can be the truth of a situation. But the sun coming to the end of its journey in the sign of Cancer in house 3, quick communications. Now that really could have seen something crystallize for you, and it may be that the conversation was about a financial matter, because if you've been working with the help of Mars over the previous 6 weeks and investing a lot of energy and passion in something that's important to you, as Mars moved at the end of last week, that could have primed up a key conversation, discussion or big decision. But also Mars, as this week begins, forges a legendary angle to Pluto. I say legendary, not lightly, because this is the first time these two have linked in these two signs in this way for 220 years. And Pluto's cheering you on in terms of your interaction with the wider world, but maybe it's also asking you to go through some transformations, which doesn't necessarily mean they're all easy. It could be around your work, it could be around your commitment to local voluntary activities, could even be your leadership skills within a family situation. But the angle between Mars in house 2 and Pluto in house 10 is very, very strong if you do want to apply for a new job, improve those aforementioned financial situations and potentials. But the conversation that's come from that particular full moon could be flowing so much better than when the sun initially moved into Cancer a month ago and we had the first Capricorn full moon, because that was conflicted by the dreamy energy of Neptune. And the conversation at that point may have revealed that someone you thought you could rely upon has actually ended up being anything but trustworthy. But now I feel that you will have worked this all out, and as we go into this new week, you can see the sun on its last degree, the anaretic degree, in the sign of Cancer, which for you is feeling your communications over the last month. That's linking perfectly to Neptune. So I feel that you will have worked something out. It may mean that someone has made way in your situation, because with Saturn also in your 11th house, along with Neptune, that's the part of our chart where we feel most inspired. It's where we want to be idealistic. But it can be about our future, and it can be about our friendships and alliances. So if someone has let you down over the last month, I feel you're working it through as we start this new week. But not only does Mars forge that sensational link to Pluto, it's also going to forge a very strong and powerful link to the Sun as he moves into the sign of Leo later on Monday. For you, that joins up with Venus and Mercury. The 4th house that Leo season represents for you is very much about how you feel about things. It's about your environment. It can be about home, the property that you live in, but also it can be about your emotional relationships. Maybe the conversations you were having on the back of that full moon we're giving you some pointers about how or what you need in terms of your immediate everyday environment. So if you are thinking of renovating a property, redecorating, perhaps moving altogether, it can all speed up from this point. But the key also is the Sun goes into an opposition with Pluto. And if those professional or worldly interactions that Pluto and Mars are pushing you to grasp, it's not quite working for you. For example, you may have a job or a role which sees you successful, but it may not actually feed you in a more nurturing way in terms of your emotional dimension. And if that's something that is primed up for you, you could feel a little bit discombobulated in the early part of this week. Also, Uranus in your sign, of course, has been forging that electric conjunction with Mars recently, and they're still in touch as we come into this new week. So you may have felt quite restless recently, but Uranus is in a square with Mercury. So if there is someone in your everyday emotional world who is not really quite getting what you're wanting, or not keeping up to speed with the rapidity of your ideas, which could be very, very quick around home and emotional and family issues, that could prove to be a little bit frustrating. But I want to reassure you that by Thursday, Mercury moves into a beautiful location for you personally, because it moves into house 5 for you. Mercury here is more playful. Your sense of humour, the sense of mischief that Mercury can generate through its rulership of Gemini, can actually play out for you in the host sign of Virgo. But of course it shares your Earth triplicity, and house 5 is where you can demonstrate your creativity, flair and talents. But I feel that 4th house energy, which is still going to be going on with the Sun's help over the next month, and your ruler Venus, is encouraging you still to stay in touch with how you feel. So if there is a creative project that you'd like to work on, whether it's crafting or hobbying, or perhaps it is converting an idea that you've had or a pleasurable pursuit into something that can earn you some money, the creativity of Mercury moving into the sign of Virgo is certainly to savour. There is a complex change on Friday, however. Not least there's a quarter moon developing towards the end of this week, but then Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, goes into a retrograde in the tender 12th house. And of course you've had the North Node there since the middle of July last year. And both those influences have been stirring up a lot to do with insecurities, anxieties, anything where you feel that your identity is not really quite as complete or secure as you would like. And because of the energy manifesting in the emotional 4th house, this could be quite tender. So through to the 29th of December, I feel it's important, if you do feel that there are outstanding parts of your history or your sense of self which are not quite as robust as you would like, it would be a great time to try to work on that in a very deep way. That could be through some counselling, it could be through some self-help books, could be from downloading some of the apps that are emerging that are very much to do with psychological and emotional welfare now, but it can be very positive for you. Do see it as an opportunity. But I must stress to you, in terms of pure finance, the fact that Mars and the planet of fortune, Jupiter, are both in your 2nd house, over the next 6 weeks you can see a pickup in your earnings or your income. But as the week ends, with the quarter moon in your sign clashing with the Sun, it's important not to be too impulsive. If you do feel fenced in or rather sensitive and someone's not being as available as you would like, don't make any quick decisions, because that quarter moon, which provides a backdrop into the week following this one, is quite tender, and sometimes we can do things to protect our pride, and there's no pride like the 1st house, because that's very much to do with our identity. But the 4th house, where the Sun is where we can feel more vulnerable. So there's some vulnerable energies manifesting there towards the end of this week. But if you want to be more dynamic in terms of your professional interactions, Mars and Pluto and Jupiter give you a lot of support. But I think it is important to stay in touch with how you feel about things. That's the critical takeout from this week. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As last week came to a close, there was a dramatic development. Mars, the planet of passion and power, moved into your sign, where he's going to be for the next 6 weeks. But the big news is that he links to Pluto in the most amazing way for the first time in over 220 years, between Gemini hosting Mars and Aquarius hosting Pluto. This gives you an opportunity to really articulate your ideas with a lot of passion. But the full moon that brought last week to a close also was asking you to make sure the ins and outs in your financial resources were working well too. And of course last week may have seen a lot of tension, a lot of unsettled energy, and perhaps there's still some of that as you come into this week, because your ruler Mercury is conflicted by Uranus through to Thursday. Now Mercury's in the part of your chart that's very much to do with what you're attached to in terms of your pride, particularly around your ideas. Someone could reveal something that could put you a little on the back foot. But the fact that on Monday, as we begin this week, the Sun joins up with Venus and your ruler Mercury in the sign of Leo is just going to give you even more certainty and conviction about the things that are really engaging you. But because the Sun does go opposite Pluto, and that becomes exact on Tuesday, there could be a big challenge to what you're saying. Now, if you feel really invested in your ideas and you're really sure of your mission, the chances are that Mars's angle to the Sun and also to Pluto can see you glance off any opposition that comes from that, or from the square between Uranus and Mercury. And as the week goes on, Mercury actually moves into the other zodiac sign that it rules, of Virgo. The good thing about that, although Virgo is an earth sign, for you, the 4th house that Mercury occupies is very much about the emotional dimension. And because there is all this air energy and fire energy, really bringing a lot of stimulation to your situation, I feel Mercury actually can just pause or slow things down a little bit in a way which can actually be positive for you. Now Friday sees Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, in your sector of how you connect to others, but also in the sign of Aries, which is very much to do with our identity. So if you're someone who's very strong in groups, comfortable in any kind of collective situation, there may be some lessons to be learnt between now and the 29th of December. But if this is an area that you're not so confident around, the chance for you to work inside yourself on this. But also, as the week draws to a close, there is a quarter moon. This quarter moon is in your 12th solar house, and it is angling to the sun in your 3rd house. So if you like, it's almost a repetition of Uranus's square to Mercury. Again, something can come into the open. Perhaps you're going to reveal an inner frustration that you've been keeping very close to your chest. Or might it be that someone's going to spring an observation upon you in terms of how they view some of your attitudes? Equally, both are possible. But the big picture from this week, Gemini, is that after the 6 weeks of Mars making its way through the most psychological part of your situation, which may have been draining, demotivating at times, it may have dragged up a lot of old stuff that perhaps you thought you dealt with in the past that actually has been still active in your subconscious. Now you're moving much more into the moment, and you are going to find yourself much more vigorous, much more engaged, but just be aware someone could see something very differently to you, and because of that, surprise you with that revelation. Have a great week. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome, Cancer, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. I'd like you to think back over the last month. The sun has been in your sign, giving you an awesome opportunity to set your stall out when it comes to your individual talents, creativity and flair, but where you want to instigate any new beginnings. But of course you did face 2 full moons, which is essentially an opposition, and that also featured your ruling planet, the moon, right at the start of the sun's journey through your sign and as last week came to a close. But what made those 2 full moons different is the first one was affected by Neptune in a less than positive way. The second one was blessed. And in fact, as you come into this week, Neptune angles beautifully to the sun in your sign. This gives you an opportunity to try to be philosophical if there are some challenges developing in your situation. But it may be difficult to stick with that, to be honest, because Mars also arrived in a very tender part of your situation as last week came to a close, the 12th house, and is going to be there for the next 6 weeks. The 12th house in traditional astrology can be hidden enemies, and of course Mars can be to do with force. What I would say to you is you may be surprised at some issues from your past that you thought you'd resolved could still be lurking deep in your subconscious. Mars has a tendency, moving through the 12th house, to stir up those energies. Sometimes we can feel tearful, sometimes we can feel on edge, sometimes rather angry. But Mars forges an amazing link to Pluto right at the start of this week in a very deep and psychological area itself. And Pluto's about transformation. So even if you do face something this week that's tricky, or someone confronts you about a situation that they see very differently, and it could be something that goes back to that clash between Mars and Uranus last week. If there was a disagreement then, there could be something that's still rumbling from that as Mercury clashes with Uranus through to Thursday. Now, Mercury and Venus in Leo have been priming up your financial sector, and the Sun moves later on Monday to join them. On the face of it, that can give you a return on some of the things that you've been developing over the last 4 weeks. This could be to do with hobbies, could be to do with interests, could be to do with a business idea. It may even be to do with a relationship. If everything is going well, I feel that you can start to get the foundations of all of that bedded down better. But if someone does see something very differently to you, the chances are they could oppose you in a very strident way. So a bit of a power battle is possible, particularly on Tuesday. It may be about shared resources, could be about spending decisions, a budget, it may be about a business, it may be about personal finance, it could even be about a romantic situation. A battle of wills is possible. But by Thursday, as Mercury, the planet of communication, moves into the second of 2 signs that it rules of Virgo, this gives you an opportunity to step back, be a bit more detached, try to work things out in a more logical way. Because however intense things have been, Neptune's application to the Sun at the start of this week asks you to see the best in people and to have some trust in the process. Mercury later in the week is asking you to understand why their responses have been as they have. But equally, it still may have rocked you if someone has been very trenchant in their opposition to what you want. Now, by Friday, if this is to do with a professional role, for example, your employer or people you employ or your own personal business, with Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, going into a retrograde through to the 29th of December, you may need to do some soul searching to unpick exactly what you want in terms of how you connect to the world, how you earn your living, how others you work with view you. And it's very much to do with identity, Chiron in Aries. If you feel really strong about your public identity, this could be an opportunity to understand other people's responses. But if you do feel less assured, dig deep and try to work with Chiron's help. Now, as the week draws to a close, we get a repetition of the energy in a way that we had with Mercury and Uranus as the quarter moon in Taurus clashes with the Sun in Leo. For you, this is an 11th second house energy. The 11th house, where Uranus has been giving you a lot of provocation over recent years to try different things, your future, your friendships, your connections, your ideals. But the Sun in the second house can be about money. So it may be that you and a friend can see something in a different way, or suddenly if you are planning some kind of new venture or start, you're being checked in terms of the idealism. So I feel that Mercury moving into Virgo is a great chance for you towards the end of this week to really get as grounded as possible in whatever you're trying to do. But also you may have to accept that someone does just see something differently to you, or maybe you see something very differently to them. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. Last week came to a close with two big events, the full moon, the second full moon in the sign of Capricorn, which for you is very much about practicalities. But the sun for the last 4 weeks has been in a very tender area, a very psychological one. If there have been some politics around your professional situation, they may not have completely shook out, to be honest. If you recall, last week we also had the conjunction between Mars and Uranus, which was exact on Monday, but rumbled on through to the middle of the week. And Uranus continues to have an influence this week by being in a right angle to Mercury in your sign. So as much as Mars moved at the end of last week into the friendly 11th house, giving you a great opportunity to network and socialize over the next 6 weeks, and forges an amazing link to the sun once it moves into your sign later on Monday, as much as there's that desire to collaborate, you'll probably still want to be at the centre of proceedings, and someone could have a little bit of resentment about that. Now, it may be a colleague, it may be a boss, a line manager, a client, a customer. Just be conscious that that politics could be simmering. Because by Tuesday, the sun moves forwards and goes into a direct opposition with the planet of power, Pluto. And I think the best way to approach things this week, even if you're determined to take a much firmer grip on your life direction, which is absolutely the right thing to do when you have the Sun, Venus and Mercury starting this week in your sign, but just be aware of trying to be collaborative. If you want everything on your own terms, you may find that someone's going to push back. Could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a romantic partner, could be a colleague. But you know, by Thursday, Mercury moves out of your sign and into the sign of Virgo, which it rules. And if you have been manifesting some brilliant new ideas of late, and you're using the energy of the sun connecting so magnificently to Mars at the start of this week and peaking by Friday, your drive, your passion and your stamina, but critically your vitality, are all going to propel you forwards. But what Mercury moving into Virgo asks you to do is to try to see the value in whatever you're trying to do, and also make sure that there's something tangible in that value. Now, by Friday, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, slams on the proverbial brakes through to the 29th of December. Because the North Node is also in the same sign as Chiron, Aries, for you that's very much about widening your horizons. And if you recall, the solar eclipse in Aries of the spring of this year was really urging you to be more daring. And if Chiron is speaking to a part of you that feels you don't quite have the knowledge, you don't quite have the qualifications, you don't quite have the worldliness to set your plans free, that's the part of your nature you need to work on. Now, as the week draws to a close, we get a repetition of Mercury square to Uranus by sign, as the sun in your sign squares up to the moon in Taurus. Now, the good thing about the moon in Taurus is it is exalted there, so it does like being there, but it suggests your feelings could be quite close to the surface. So if there has been a little bit of turbulence this week, perhaps running on from that Mars-Uranus conjunction, or Mercury's clash with Uranus, or the sun's opposition with Pluto, it could be more difficult to disguise how you feel. Look at it this way, even if you're being very single-minded, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you really have got a singular plan that you want to pursue, just be aware that it still needs to in some way bring along with you some key decision makers, whether it is your folks, whether it is the local bank manager, whether it is the people you want to reach with your idea, and their setting and stance may be a little bit more conventional. So if you are doing something that's new and fresh and exciting, and there's every chance you can be manifesting that this week, just be aware that some people may be a little slow on the uptake, and you're going to need a little bit of patience to deal with that. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Virgo to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As the week begins, Mars has moved into the most prominent part of your chart, the 10th house. Over the next 6 weeks, you've got a glorious opportunity to raise your profile and be super dynamic. It also links in an inspirational way to Pluto, the planet of change. If you have felt a little dissatisfied, particularly around your professional situation, or closed in and felt a bit trapped, the chances are you may want to use the combination between those two influences to reflect on your options, but particularly professionally, because as last week came to a close, the full moon, the second in succession in your sister Earth sign of Capricorn, does suggest that you may have reached some sort of crossroads. It could be professional, it could be personal, it could even be around a relationship, because the sun moves on Monday later in the day into the reflective 12th house, joining up with Venus and Mercury, your ruler. So you could be entering a period of time when you want to just step back a little bit. Let all the recent activities that have played out in your situation just settle on your senses. We all live in such a full-on way these days. Sometimes we do need to decompress, and that takes a little bit of time. We need the space to breathe, just rest. And if you do find yourself wanting to do something that's more to do with healing, personal development, check into a spa, have some pampering, then really do be open to this. But it's also the case that your ruler Mercury is in a very abrasive right angle with the restless energies of Uranus. So there could still be some information that's coming into the open, perhaps some revelations that you may find a little bit difficult. But just be assured that by Thursday, Mercury moves into your sign. That's going to help you to start to reconnect to what's really important to you. But because the sun goes opposite the deeply psychological Pluto on Tuesday, anything you are reflecting on, particularly around your work or some lifestyle choices, may feel like it's very powerful indeed. But the movement of Mercury into your sign is going to help you to start to regain your sense of equilibrium. Now Friday sees the wounded healer, Chiron, go into a retrograde. For you, that's in house 8. That's where you're most invested, it's where you're most connected. If you're wanting to disconnect from something, because remember, you've had Mars and Uranus last week in a furnace-like embrace in the ninth house, which has either propelled you into a new adventurous and independent new venture, or it's given you the desire to separate yourself from something that's just become too limiting. So what's going to happen with Chiron in its retrograde? I feel that you will do some soul searching through to the end of the year. The quarter moon at the end of this week repeats the energy of Mercury square to Uranus. The moon's in the sign of Taurus, which of course shares your earth triplicity, but for you that is about freedom. But the position of the sun is in the 12th house. That's to do with those tender energies. But the 9th house where the moon is can also be to do with truths. And whatever you're processing this week, or whatever you're hearing from other people, the chances are that it can feel very tender for you. It's very easy for you to amplify whatever information is coming in and feel a little on edge. But the big picture is that Mercury moving into your sign is the beginning of a new period that hasn't quite gained traction, because what you're being asked to do with all the energy at the start of this week in Leo, despite that very dominant position of Mars, is just give yourself permission to be sensitive, perhaps even vulnerable, but to work out, give yourself the space to work out what you really want to do next. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these. I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Libra to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Well, as last week came to a close, we had the second consecutive full moon, emphasizing your emotions, with the sun high in the sky, emphasizing your ambitions. But this time, we had the energy of Mars supporting you in such a brilliant way. If you recall, there was a further Capricorn full moon a month ago, and that was really mashed up by the rather confusing energies of Neptune in the part of your situation to do with your energy. So as you come into this week, if you are still trying to work out your work-life balance, one of the things that Mars is encouraging you to do is have a little bit more space and freedom for yourself. Because whether it is your professional demands or family and home needs, at the end of the day, we all have a part of us that does need to be free and liberated. And Mars is going to give you a great opportunity over the next 6 weeks to discover that more. But it also forges a fantastic link to Pluto right at the start of this week for the first time in 220 years between the signs of Gemini and Aquarius. Pluto is in the 5th house, very much about manifesting your talent, your creativity and your flair. Also, your social interactions can be boosted by that. So even if you have felt a bit caught up in professional demands of late, this link to Mars is just encouraging you to think, well, look, when did I last see my friends? When did I do something more spontaneous? And of course, the Sun moves later on Monday, linking up with Mars in a fantastically positive way, which peaks on Friday, but it does go opposite Pluto. What does this mean? Well, it means that the Sun joining up with your ruler Venus and Mercury in your 11th house, very much about your future, but it's also about your connections, the network, and it can also be about the things that really inspire you, that go beyond the physical and more ambitious domain. But Pluto is saying that whatever you do, it's got to feel that you're very much at the heart of things in terms of feeling inspired and involved. So if there are some friendships or associations you've had in the past that aren't quite working for you in the way they used to do, that Mars position could see you wanting to break free of those as much as anything to do with your professional or emotional sphere too. Now, there is a clash this week between Mercury in your 11th house and Uranus in the 8th. If you did feel a lot of tension last week, particularly at the start of the week, with the combination of Mars and Uranus, it may have been about shared finances. It could have been around something where you felt really compelled to do something in an impulsive way, perhaps a little bit out of character. But Uranus is still in that area, even though Mars has moved on. And the 8th house is about transformations, whereas Mercury in the 11th house, much more logical, but you could still feel a little bit on edge and a little bit ragged until Thursday. Because then on Thursday, Mercury moves into a more sheltered location, and it may give you a little bit of an incentive to find some peace and tranquility. But if a relationship issue has been at the heart of some of the balancing you're trying to get around your personal freedom, the fact that Chiron goes into a retrograde on Friday through to the end of the year, that could be an area of big shifts for you, particularly once Pluto goes moves back into the sign of Capricorn across the 1st and 2nd of September, depending on where you live. The week comes to an end with a quarter moon in Taurus, that 8th house energy again, highly charged, passionate, intense, transformational, battling with the more logical, friendly energies of the Sun in Leo. I feel basically, if there is somebody around you who's been very possessive or controlling or trying to leverage something, the last couple of weeks with that combination between Mars and Uranus may have given you a lot of food for thought. And if it is a romantic alliance, the fact that Chiron goes retrograde and that quarter moon at the end of the week really gives you yet even more food for thought. But essentially this week I feel the key issue is Mars moving into your 9th house, because it's very much to do with your need for space, independence and freedom. And if something has just become too heavy, too bogged down, it's not really working for you, your future hopes coming through Leo need to have you more in touch with your higher aspirations. So essentially, whether it's to do with a business involvement, a job, an activity or a relationship, what you're wanting at the moment is a sense that your direction is clean, and if something isn't clean and clear, you may be cutting some ties. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits, That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. As last week came to a close, there may have been some highly charged conversations. The full moon in your third house of everyday thinking, clashing with the sun in the ninth house of higher truths. Perhaps you and someone have seen something very differently. And of course, at the start of last week, we had that mighty collision between Mars, your traditional ruler, and Uranus, the planet of freedom. So if it is around a relationship where you felt hemmed in, the big discussion may have occurred over the weekend preceding this particular week. So where does that leave us? Well, Mars has moved on. And at the end of last week, it's moved into the sign of Gemini, forging a very potent link with Pluto, your modern ruler. If you are wanting to transform something around a property matter, perhaps move, take out a lease, buy a property, or renovate, the combination between Mars and Pluto is awesome, particularly if there are contracts or discussions to be had along those lines. But the sun moves on Monday, later in the day, into the most glorious part of your situation in terms of raising your profile. Joins up with Venus, the planet of charm, but also Mercury, the planet of business, but also communication. So you've got three visible players there, pushing you into the limelight. If you're comfortable with that, Scorpio, this can be a time when you can really put your foot to the floor around goals and ambitions. But there is potentially a conflict because the sun goes face to face with Pluto on Tuesday. And if you're not quite sure, you're not certain of the direction that some of your professional involvements are taking, you may find yourself questioning quite deeply what the process is about. Also, Uranus in your seventh house is clashing with Mercury in the 10th through to Thursday. There may be someone you need to work with, or you should be connecting with if you really want to go for that more ambitious route. It's not really your cup of tea, and you may find the inner rebel within you just recoiling a little bit from doing exactly what's expected of you. But if you're not a natural bohemian and you do want to make your way to the proverbial boardroom, this week is set up for you to take a giant step forwards. But even if you just want to marshal your long-term resources in a much more effective way, the link between the sun and Mars through to Friday when it peaks can give you a tremendous amount of motivation to work on that. Also, Mercury, the planet of contracts, moves into your sector of your long-term plan on Thursday, and that can create greater clarity. But Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, does go into a retrograde in your sixth house on Friday through to the 29th of December. Now, some astrologers pin Chiron as a comet that's very much to do with health. I think it's very much to do with psychology. It's where we can actually glow up and show our natural talent, our superpower. In the sixth house, if you are someone who's very practical and super efficient, but you feel everyone around you is not, the trick here over the length of this retrograde is to work on trying to understand that not everybody will meet your standards. On the other hand, if you are a little bit untidy or disorganized, or you could tighten up a little bit in terms of the virtue around your diet and exercise, Chiron retrograde is certainly a good nudge to do that. But as the week draws to a close, the moon in your opposite sign of Taurus, where it's, to be honest, blessed, it's exalted, clashes with the sun. Once more, there could be that someone in a position of authority that doesn't quite see things the same as you. But essentially what's happening this week, Scorpio, is you're starting to show your power and authority in a more assertive way. Some people will go with that, some people will resist it. or it could be that you encounter someone who wants to impose their authority on you and you will resist it or go with it. So I feel that's the central theme of this week, but the energy that's created with Mars linking to Pluto and the Sun is absolutely manifest. And if you're very clear about what you want to achieve, your energy can be absolutely fantastically high to take a giant step forwards. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these. I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As last week came to a close, there were 2 dramatic events. The second consecutive full moon in the part of your situation to do with your values, everyday finance and your self-worth. And also Mars moving on Sunday into the part of your situation to do with your boundaries, but also your relationships. Mars is going to be in your 7th house for the next 6 weeks. If you would like to meet someone, being more daring, stepping outside your comfort zone can really see you connect to some very exciting individuals, particularly over the next month, but especially this week through to Friday. The reason Sagittarius is the sun moves on Monday into your sister fire sign of Leo. The sun rules the sign of Leo, but joins also critically with Venus and Mercury. This is the part of your situation that really evokes that part of you that enjoys being spontaneous, loves variety, can be very open-minded, travel, being more adventurous and independent. But why is that part of your nature being rather muted of late? Well, it has partly been because Saturn for the last 15 months has been in a very powerful part of your situation in terms of emotion. And Saturn can be to do with limitations, but it also can be to do with lessons. And I think you've been learning much more about your inner world. Neptune's been there since 2012, but at times I feel it has been confusing for you exactly what you've needed. And then, of course, last week we had the clash between Mars and Uranus in your 6th house. Very much to do with obligations, responsibilities, things that you kind of have to do. But with Mars in the mix, any resentment you've been feeling, particularly if it seems that other people have been taking you for granted, may have seen you feeling very on edge, very brittle, or perhaps very charged up, perhaps even very irritable. Mars moving at the end of last week into house 7, whether you're discussing the finances or values that came from that full moon or a relationship matter, it's just giving you the encouragement to be clear about what you will or won't accept. But it also gives you a lot of motivation if you'd like to bring someone new into your world. But the energy of the sun moving into Leo, connecting with Pluto, but also with the sun, is quite complex. Because you're someone who's very invested in knowledge, the arrival of the sun joining with Mercury and Venus in house 9 really gives that part of your nature a lot of an extra boost. But the Sun goes opposite Pluto on Tuesday exactly. So you could find the fallout from last week's connection to Mars and Uranus and the full moon means that you feel, with Mars's help, that you've got to assert your truth, which could come from the Sun in house 9. But because it's opposite Pluto, you just need to be mindful of how it may be received. It doesn't mean to say you shouldn't say what you feel, but it does suggest maybe choosing your words with as much care as possible. Otherwise, someone could see that you're being so demanding of things on your terms, even if you're absolutely right in terms of the content of what you're saying, the tone will be important. So try to keep people with you, because Uranus does continue to cause irritations this week. It's clashing with Mercury, and Mercury in the 9th house, like the Sun and Venus, is wanting the truth of a situation to come out, but it may be that something does require a little bit of a compromise. And that opposition between the Sun and Pluto is not a compromising aspect at all. So as much as Mars moving into the 7th house, the Sun into the 9th house, really evokes within you some very natural, traditional astrological energies linked to the archetype of your sign. Freedom loving, frank, won't take a step backwards when it's on a point of principle or discussing a topic that's knowledge based. If it's a discussion around a more sensitive, emotional or family matter, try to summons up as much diplomacy as you can. Now Mercury is going to be moving on Thursday into your 10th house. And if some of the sensations that you're experiencing at the moment are to do with your professional situation, you feel it's dull, predictable, too much is being expected of you, there's not enough acknowledgement, Mercury moving into your 10th house can prime up a desire within you to find a new opportunity which does reward your talent, but most of all your intellect. But Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, goes into a retrograde on Friday in your 5th house. This is very much where we manifest our individuality, our creativity and flair. If you're really intact in that way, Mercury is a great opportunity to raise your profile. If you're less assured about what you've got to offer, work on that through to the end of the year. The quarter moon in Taurus on Sunday, however, is once more emphasizing the same energy that Uranus's clash with Mercury had, the 9th 6. And essentially the 9th house is about that freedom, but the 6th house reminds us of our obligations. And however much you might want to drop everything this week, head off to a festival, book a foreign holiday last minute, walk out into your bright new future because it's what you're really wanting to do in that moment. I think essentially you are being asked to try to find a nice balance between being in touch with what makes you special as a truth seeker, but at the same time understanding that life is for us all a series of compromises, and with freedom comes those responsibilities. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As last week came to a close, there was the second successive full moon in your sign, which was really asking you to think about relationship matters. But relationships don't have to be in a romantic context. We have one with ourselves, that's the primary relationship. But it can be with colleagues, can be to do with friends, and of course family members. But if something has felt a little out of kilter, it may be because there hasn't been enough passion in the mix for your taste, and that's because of the combination of Mars and Uranus, which evoked that desire in the first half of last week. But as last week came to a close, so did Mars move into a much more practical location. Actually forges a very solid link to Pluto, the planet of transformation. If there is something you want to shift around managing your resources more carefully, this can be a key week, particularly to do with long-term investments, shares, property matters, anything to do with savings, pensions, inheritances, stuff like that. And that's because the sun's going to be moving into house 8, which governs these things, but also you have Venus and Mercury in this area too. But just as that full moon manifested, Neptune, which was a mischief maker on the first full moon in your sign a month ago, has actually applied a lot of magic. And as you come into this week, the sun in Cancer on its last degree forges a wonderful arc to Neptune, and you could have a discussion which actually does find a real connection with someone in a very positive way. But if that connection isn't forthcoming, and the electric energy of that connection between Mars and Uranus was just a fleeting, perhaps fling, then perhaps you'll be philosophical about moving on. But if you did reach that connection, or you managed to have the dialogue to work things out, the sun moving into Leo could see you get closer and more invested. But to be honest, absolutely the opposite can be true too. And that's because the sun on Tuesday goes directly opposite Pluto. And if you feel there isn't the scope to get deeper and closer, then it is going to be very obvious to you. So it could be a break point that if a relationship has really been struggling, however much the connection in a romantic sense has been really good. Perhaps the issue is more to do with values or beliefs that are not quite aligned. I actually feel that the very old-fashioned way of approaching relationships still holds true. If we have value systems that align, that can really help when things get a little tense between two people. But whatever your situation, there is transformation in the air, particularly to break free of something that has felt rather possessive or controlling, and that's Uranus applying to Mercury through to the middle of the week. But then Mercury moves into the part of your scope to do with liberty, freedom and exploration. If you do want to break away from all the drama that's been going on, that's a great opportunity to book that trip, get away with a friend, do something much more spontaneous. You may even think about booking a vacation or a course of higher education with Mercury's help. But then we have Chiron. The so-called wounded healer is very tender in your 4th house. If there has been some challenges in the family dimension since 2019, it may be because of Chiron. Of course, it depends on where Chiron is in your natal chart, but in terms of collectively, Chiron retrograding through to the 29th of December suggests if you don't feel heard within your family unit or seen or recognised, that could be something that can make you feel particularly tender. But what you can also do is try to work on your inner wound. But remember, your ability to be a listener, caring and supportive can be emphasised by Chiron's retrograde. Now, as the week draws to a close, the moon is in a very positive location for you, very affectionate, very warm, and potentially playful. But it, like Uranus before it, clashing with Mercury, clashes with the Sun across the same houses. So we've got the 5th, 8th house square. And that does suggest again, if possessiveness or control has been part of that relationship scenario that you've been battling with over the next month, that may be something you really want to find a solution to. And as I mentioned, with Mercury having moved into your sector of freedom, if something has just got too bogged down, too entrenched and too heavy, it may be a decision you make by the end of this week to at least have some time to yourself. But if you want to use the energy in Leo in a more practical way, its superpowered link to Mars suggests you can have a lot of energy if you're wanting to work on investments or business or entrepreneurial ideas, and it can be very much a case of full steam ahead. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. As this week begins, we've got the fallout from the full moon, which was in your 12th house, which is, to be honest, a very tender area for a full moon. It may have brought some issues into the open of a more psychological nature, perhaps some old stuff or some hidden stuff coming up. But also, concurrent with this, of course, Mars moved into your sister air sign of Gemini, which was a truly brilliant event because that means Mars has finished its journey through house 4, very disruptive, particularly when it went alongside Uranus, your modern ruler, at the start to the middle of last week, which may have created some very unsettled energies. But Mars moving into Gemini links to Pluto in Aquarius for the first time in 220 years. What a tremendous opportunity. If you are born early in Aquarius, you're going to feel the uplift from this in a particularly powerful way. That doesn't change the fact there's still the energy to work through from that full moon. So if there is still some sensitive stuff floating around, don't ignore it. Stay conscious to it and stay open to it. But if you do want to be more dynamic over the next week, Mars moving into Gemini certainly is a great chance to do so, because the 5th house is where we can showcase our talent, showcase the part of our qualities and skills and flair and artistry, but also to enjoy life, to have some fun. It's much more outgoing, much more energized, much more fun. But it also links beautifully to the moving sun, which arrives in Leo later on Monday, but by Tuesday goes opposite Pluto. So we have some complex stuff going on. The relationship between the sun in the 7th house of relating, where you've had Venus, which is excellent, and also Mercury, very good too. And the sun's arrival does put the focus on relationships. So things have felt a bit brittle, a bit imbalanced. Perhaps you felt there's been a lot of practical expectations and responsibilities. The sun in the sign of Cancer, which has had an impact on your psychological health, feeling drained, tired, that electric energy in your home or emotional sector, family responsibilities, anything to do with properties. But the connection between Mars and the Sun, which peaks on Friday of this week, suggests that there can be a big paradigm shift this week, which can really be good for you. But the Sun's opposition to Pluto on Tuesday is something we need to be mindful of, because the 7th house is where we need to collaborate, where we need to cooperate, where we need to understand how it is for the other person as much as it is for ourselves. And actually, Aquarius people are usually pretty good at that, even if it is in a bit of a cool, detached way. But with Pluto in the mix, it's also reminding us Aquarius people not to forget our needs as an individual. So that energy crests up on Tuesday, but we do have a disruptive link still between Mercury in the 7th house of relating and Uranus in that 4th house area. So if there is someone close to us who's not quite being as open or as availing as we would like, or there is any discussions going on around a property matter, things can still feel a bit on edge. But then on Thursday, Mercury makes its way into the second sign it rules of Virgo. And that's a deep dive. So the discussion that's going on, the 7th house energy, with Mercury moving into Virgo, is actually what it means. So we can have the dialogue. Mercury helps us to decipher and unlock the true meaning. However, on Friday, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, goes into a retrograde in the 3rd house, which is our connections with neighbours, our connections to siblings, but also our connections to our beliefs and our ideas. That goes on through to the 29th of December. If you're very strong on how you feel about things and you have good relationships across those areas, it may be still an opportunity to have a careful think about whether you feel heard as quite as much as you would like, or critically, are you hearing other people as much as they would like? The week comes to a close with the position of the moon in Taurus, once again emphasizing your home and emotional sector, squaring up with the sun in the 7th house. There may be two people close to you who are finding life a little bit difficult between them. You could find yourself as the referee trying to assist both parties. Perhaps just around a relationship you have of any kind, with a colleague, with a friend, with potentially a family member or a partner. It may be that your emotional needs don't quite feel heard, because the 7th house, where the sun has arrived on Monday of this week, is very much about listening up, trying to find that midpoint between what we need and what other people need. But it's also about protecting what we want, so it's our boundaries too. So it's a delicate balance, but definitely a week when you can feel much more energized, much more engaged with other people. If you are wanting to forge a new relationship with someone from a romantic viewpoint, the next 4 weeks with the sun making its way through this sign definitely provides, along with Venus, some true opportunities. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye. Welcome Pisces to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 22nd of July for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. The week begins with a quite magical link between Neptune, your ruler, and the sun. The sun for the last 4 weeks has been in the 5th house. This is all about showcasing the best of yourself and also the best of life. It's about having pleasures and fun, but that link with Neptune really quite delightful, because if we go back to when the sun first moved into Cancer, Neptune was actually in a square with the sun, but also the full moon, the first of the two that we had in Capricorn. Of course, at the weekend we had the second. So how are things for you in terms of your plans or your connections to others? Because the sun's wanting you to make sure you focus on yourself. The moon's reminding you that there are other people in the equation. But Mars has moved at the end of last week too into the part of your chart to do with home, family and emotion. Now, if there are some physical tasks you want to catch up on, whether it is some refitting, home decoration, changes to the garden, some carpentry, building work, perhaps even some do-it-yourself tasks, Mars here for the next 6 weeks can give you a furnace-like energy to crack on and get those tasks done. And what's going to help is the sun's move into Leo later on Monday and collaborates brilliantly with Mars. So if there is anything about getting your domestic everyday world working more efficiently, that combination between the sun and Mars gives you a lot of oomph. But of course, Mars also forges a link to Pluto in your 12th house. So there may be some very evocative energies that come up at the start of this week. You may feel hugely nostalgic. You may even be in the mood to reconnect to someone from your past. But the move of the sun into your 6th house clashes with Pluto in your 12th. And it's important to understand that the sun moving into Leo does give you a chance to reform, work on health, fitness, diet, your job, if that's something you're not particularly satisfied with. But Pluto's saying it's important to be mindful of your psychological motivations, what is priming up your decision making. So, for example, if you're thinking of leaving something, what's the deeper reason for that? What's the motive behind it? Now, Mercury is going to be important this week. It clashes with Uranus, creating a lot of tension. You could feel a bit on edge. That will start to ease by Thursday when Mercury goes into your opposite sign. Then you can let go a little bit if someone sees something different to you. Things won't feel quite as brittle. And it's important to understand that people have a right to have a different viewpoint. Don't have to take that personally. There is the retrograde of Chiron that begins on Friday through to the 29th of December. For you, that's house 2, very much about your self-worth, value and attitude to money. If you've got a very robust sense of yourself, perhaps the lesson that can be learnt with Chiron's help through to then is how you approach people who are not so strong in that regard. And it's important to be respectful even if people don't necessarily come up to our standards. If you're someone who tends to be a bit picky about that, perhaps that's where Chiron's calling out to you to work on yourself. However, if you are someone who feels that you could strengthen up your sense of worth, this is a big opportunity. Sunday sees a quarter moon in house 3 clashing with the sun in house 6. That virtue that's coming in and the desire to get things working as efficiently and smoothly as possible is going to be very strong this week, and Mars definitely in its peak with the Sun on Friday gives you a lot of raw physical energy. But there's only so many minutes in each hour, and each hour of the day. Set yourself a reasonable schedule for this week, Pisces, because if you don't, by the end of the week, you could be feeling a bit ragged because you're trying to do too much. So one of the important things this week, I think, is to get busy around home and family matters, but particularly if there are physical tasks you can clear up. Do think about how you may tighten up things around your diet and exercise routine. If you're not happy in your work, that's an area you can look at too. But I don't think this is the best of weeks to be wanting perfection or trying too hard to get everything exactly as you want too quickly. It's been great being with you, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, a personal consultation, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these. I share them as is. Discover what other people have found working with me. If you would like to become a patron from $3 a month, I upload a lot of extra information. If you are already a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. And if you would like to ascend beyond this zodiac forecast and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights to the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months transits. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Also, if you know your tropical astrology, but you'd like to discover your draconic astrology based on your soul, your karmic charts, please see below for that too. The same package, it can be very, very different to your natal chart, but very much an eye-opener. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye.